What's going on, everybody? Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Before we start the podcast, I say it every week, please hit subscribe. Please leave us some comments during it, or ask some questions. We can get back to you in the comment section. And also, if you do like it, please share it with your friends. It means the world. It makes the podcast go a bit further, and gradually it's getting bigger and bigger, which is amazing to see. Podcast time. This week is a really interesting one. Cory Goldsmith, aka Dr. Cory Goldsmith. He works for a company called iZotope, which is a plugin software. He is a software developer and head of a software development team. Extremely intelligent guy. And I really wanted to get him on the podcast to kind of talk in depth of what plugins do and how plugins work, and also just kind of giving people that aren't in the music industry, that want to be in the music industry, that aren't necessarily wanting to be an artist, that just other roads into the industry of what options are out there. So I loved this conversation. It was really good. Went into it not really knowing, I'd never spoken to Cory before, but he's a great guy and very eloquent with his vocabulary. Just a great conversation. So without further ado, Cory Goldsmith. Cory Goldsmith, what's cooking, man? How are you?
Hey, man. I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan of the podcast. And
thanks for getting up early.
Yeah, no worries. I like being on European time.
What time is it there? 7:30?
It's 8:30 actually, so okay. It's not quite. It's fine.
Not too bad. Whereabouts are you in the States?
I'm in Atlanta currently.
Oh, cool. Nice.
I'm from here originally, but I just moved back last summer.
Amazing, man. Amazing.
Yeah.
Why did you move back? Where were you?
I was in Boston, and then Colorado before that. I moved to Boston for the job to work for iZotope. And then we could work remote, and I was traveling a lot as like my music career picked up and things like that. And I wanted to be closer to family. And Boston is also like, I mean, you used to live in New York. New York is like the one place that's more expensive than Boston in the U.S.
And also, sorry, I just dropped something. 1 second.
Oh, you good, man?
I need to stop being a child and playing with the camera
nice.
cap every time I fucking am on this podcast.
ADD is a great thing.
No, I was in Boston not so long ago, actually. I love the city. I really like the city, but yeah, I've heard it's pretty pricey.
It's gorgeous. I do love Boston a lot, and I miss a good bit of it, but moving back to Atlanta was one of the best decisions I ever made, to be honest.
Atlanta's amazing now.
Dude, it's gotten, like, from when I grew up, like, I left 11 years ago, and the dance music scene wasn't anything close to what it is now, and that's one of the reasons I moved back, too. It was just, I came back home to visit my parents, and was just seeing the dance music scene thrive. I was like, oh, wow, Atlanta's totally different.
It's changed a lot.
It's
still hip-hop.
Of course. Yeah.
Like, hip-hop runs the roost there.
Yeah, absolutely.
But still, like, it's definitely changing. And the like food scene's insane there now.
Oh yeah.
Like, it feels like the downtown feels better. There's a lot of like cool areas popping up. It's a cool city. I really like
absolutely.
It's hot as fuck though. I don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah, that's. I always said I'd never move back to Atlanta because of the weather and the traffic.
Yeah.
And then I ended up coming back and dealing with it. So, but moving back during the summer was rough.
Brutal.
Yeah, it was like 100 degrees Fahrenheit and like moving boxes and stuff. No good. Is
property like reasonably priced out there as well?
The people that have been living here for the last decade would say no, but someone that lived in Colorado and then Boston coming back, I'm like, wow, my money is like goes so much further. Wow, this is amazing.
Yeah, it's like all the Californians that moved to like Montana,
right,
and Austin, and all of those places.
Exactly.
Like during COVID, it's just made it so much cheaper.
It really has.
But yeah, made it the locals made it so much more expensive for the locals.
Oh yeah.
I was in Montana not so long ago and talking to the Uber driver who born and bred there, and he was like, it's crazy how expensive it's gotten.
In Montana?
Montana's, yeah. Yeah, dude.
I mean, it is beautiful.
It's unbelievable there, man. Bozeman, Montana.
Bozeman, Montana. I'm gonna have to add that to my list.
And you've got to go, man. It's amazing. I went to Whitefish and I went to Bozeman. I played shows there.
Amazing.
And, yeah, it was amazing. The people were so cool. The food was amazing. Just it's just such big landscapes.
Mm-hmm.
You literally like can see for miles, and it's just beautiful. Cold.
Yeah. I feel like that's one of the reasons why, you know, a lot of Americans don't travel internationally as much, as we're so spoiled with what we have in this country. Like,
such a big country.
It's so huge, and there's like every different, you know, sort of geography you can think of, you know.
I'm not a huge fan of California generally. Like, I wouldn't want to live there, but you can live in LA, you can be at the beach, and within 3.5 hours you can be in the mountains. It's like unheard of. Exactly.
And to be fair, and apologies to anyone from California listening, but I'm not a huge... I love visiting, but I could never live in California either. It's just not my vibe.
Yeah, I did some time there, but probably not unless I have to.
Yeah,
really. You can be productive though. I find it very productive there, especially for me in the writing sessions. It's like you can get a lot done in LA. People want to work. People want to be successful.
That's very true. Yeah,
which I really respect that. There's nowhere else really in America that I feel like is the same in the music industry.
I think that's definitely true, in my opinion. I mean, I think the thing, though, and this is funny to say, but one of the things that kills me about California is Pacific time, like being 3 hours behind the East Coast, and like, you know, 8 hours behind the UK, 9 hours behind Central Europe. It's like you feel like you're behind the rest of the world when you're there. It's feel
rough.
Like
when because I used to live in LA, and I found that massive. It was like the first time I lived in America. Away from home, and it just got very kind of like, what's the word, alone. That's not the word I'm looking for.
Isolated,
yeah, that's exactly the word. Because you're just like, all my family, all my friends were in the UK at the time. Like, I didn't really know many people in LA, and you're just like, every time you're waking up, everyone else is pretty much done with their day and about to get ready for bed, and you're like, oh, it's rough.
Yeah.
But also the thing that really pisses me off is any of my team that are listening, all my team are pretty much based in America, in California. Oh, so like, when I'm in the UK, I have to do 2 work days. So I work all day in the studio or doing whatever I need to do, recording podcasts, and then 6 p.m. strikes here, and then everybody in California starts working, and then I start working the night again, and I'm doing meetings until like I've got a meeting tonight at like 9 p.m.
Yeah.
And you're just like, fucking hell, like, just gets late.
That's what I started during the pandemic. I was starting to work from, you know, remotely when that happened, and I still work from Europe when I'm there. And particularly like in Berlin, we have, you know, the Native Instruments office over there, and Berlin has a special place in my heart. But when I'm there, I love the mornings because my team in Boston hasn't woken up yet. I can just get some nice quality work time, and then everyone wakes up and I'm like overwhelmed at like 7 p.m. and I'm like, shit, like, I need to get to sleep at this point, but there's things going on, but I do prefer being ahead versus being behind.
I agree. Yeah, 100% agree. So the reason why I wanted to get you on the podcast was you work at iZotope.
Yeah.
For anybody.
You didn't want to talk about time zones? I mean, that's something I can...
Maybe later. We'll go into more depth on that.
Yeah, nice.
iZotope, for anybody that doesn't know, is a huge... I'll let you explain what it is, because I'm just going to absolutely butcher it. So what is iZotope?
iZotope is a plugin developer. We make audio plugins. So for those of you who are new to music production or don't produce music, plugins are kind of separate pieces of software you can buy to put in Ableton Live or Logic Pro or whatever digital audio workstation you use. We make like probably the most famous one we make is Ozone, and RX is a huge one in Hollywood, which is for audio repair. Ozone's for mastering, which we can talk about mastering at some point. Yeah. We mostly make like mixing and mastering tools, but we also have a few like really cool creative plugins we've made, like vocal synth, things like that. And then during the pandemic, we became part of Native Instruments, basically. So we're kind of a brand under the Native Instruments company now. And Native Instruments is a separate brand that makes audio software, as well as Tractor, which is a really famous DJ software. Yeah. So iZotope I've used for a very long time. You've got vocal synth, VAA, tonal balance control, shutter edit, RX, Ozone, Neutron, Neoverb, Nectar, Insight, exponential, audio reverbs, and dialogue match. There's a lot of plugin softwares out there, but specifically why I wanted to get you on the podcast is because I feel like iZotope is like one of the biggest in the industry and very consistent with what you guys do. Thank you.
What's your role there?
So I'm a senior software developer there. Okay. So I write code. And I run, I don't run. I'm the technical lead on one of the teams. We made, most recently, we made Nectar 4, Neutron 4, Audiolens, but we all kind of get our hands dirty in other products as well. Pretty much RX is the only one I haven't had a significant role in my time at iZotope.
So I want to go back from... I guess the reason why also getting you on here is kind of like there's people that listen to this podcast that aren't in music, that are just interested in music, but some of them might be software developers, some of them might be wanting to get into the music industry but aren't creative or don't want to be creative, as in everyone's creative, but as in making music kind of person. They don't want to be a DJ, they don't want to be a producer, they don't want to be an engineer, but they want to be working in the music industry. I know you have a music career outside of working at iZotope, but like, when did you decide that you wanted to work at a music software company writing code? Was that always a goal, or like, where did that come from?
That's a great question. No, I wish it had always been a goal sometimes, because, well, basically to answer your question, when did I decide it was when I was getting my Ph.D. in chemical physics, which sounds... Wow. Yeah, like you're like, oh, well, you could have made tons of money doing physics.
Go work at Tesla.
Yeah, Tesla or SpaceX, or even like, they pay theoretical physics PhDs a buttload of money to do like finance tech and, make the whatever. But I started producing music at university, but I decided, and I was in a band. But I decided, like mathematics and physics and chemistry was kind of, seemed like the more reasonable route to go down. And it was something I was really passionate about and still am. Yeah. So I decided to get a doctorate. And then after my oral exam, which anyone that's gotten a PhD before will know that's like one of the hardest days of your life. It's emotionally traumatic. But like... After that, I started, really reflecting and being like, what, as much as I love this, I don't think being like a scientist in academia is for me. And I also couldn't get away from music. I started DJing more in grad school, and I was like, I'm not going to be happy unless I'm doing music, something related to music. So I, kind of on a whim, a friend of mine went to South by Southwest and had gotten a business card from the head of software engineering at Ableton. Yeah. And I reached out and was just like, hey, this is my deal. I'd really, like to be involved at some point. Long story short, I ended up getting an internship at Ableton. Oh, cool. It was awesome. Yeah, I got to live in Berlin for a summer, and I realized immediately this is what I want to do, because it had all the things I love about mathematics and also everything I love about music, and it just allowed me to combine my passions. So after I graduated, I'm a doctor now. I'm like, okay, it's time to go for it.
Do I get to put on the title? Do I get to put Dr. Cory Goldsmith?
You can if you want. Yeah, you can. It's
makes it sound cooler, right?
It does, and that's pretty much the only thing I use it for these days is to basically impress people and put doctor in front of my name. But yeah, it's actually, well, we can talk about that later. But I have a nice party trick where I affirm lies and say, no, it's okay. Trust me, I'm a doctor.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a hit at parties. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it took me a while actually to get a job in the industry. I was getting turned down. I even got turned down by Ableton after I'd interned for them. And to be fair, my software development skills were not nearly as high at that point. Like there's a different, I was doing theoretical physics. So I was writing code, but it was scientist code, which is not production ready.
So explain that. Go into a little bit more depth of that because I have no idea what you're
talking about. So the main difference is when you're doing like theoretical physics, all that matters is like the data and the result. Yeah. The code that makes the calculations and stuff, you're the only one that's going to need to read that code and understand that code.
Makes sense.
Yeah. But in a big software company, it's like, you might leave the company and someone else has to read your code, or else if it breaks, Ozone doesn't work anymore and you lose millions of dollars. Yeah. So it has to be very readable and clear and very focused on performance, so you don't have audio dropouts, things like that. So my code was very unreadable. Ableton was right to turn me down. And so I started applying just for software engineering roles so that I could at least beef up my skills and maybe get hired by an Ableton or someone like that. And then after 6 months of searching, I was broke. I'd been 6 months removed from grad school. I'm not making much money. I'm just teaching music production courses, which doesn't pay enough. And I saw iZotope had a role open. I was like, okay, well, I don't think they're gonna take me, but might as well try this again. And it was actually a blessing that, I guess, in disguise, as they say, that the 6 months I couldn't get a job because I ended up at iZotope and never looked back.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's been a really great journey.
And going from Ableton to teaching production to then being at iZotope, did you actually have to do any like personal development on the software development and how you wrote code and everything like that? Like, what was that process to get to the level of being where you're at today? Yeah,
absolutely. It was a lot of practice. There's this, this might be a nice tip, or people have probably heard of Juice before, Juce. It's a C++ like open source framework for making audio software. A lot of plugins that people use actually do have a back end of Juice because it's just like way easier than having to create everything from scratch. It's
how do you spell that?
Juce.
Yeah.
And it's like basically like buying a sample pack or a preset pack instead of having to sound design all of your sounds yourself, right?
Okay.
And so I started practicing with that and looking at other people's examples and stuff. And it was a good thing because when I interviewed for iZotope, I had to show something I built. So I was like, okay, here's this cool little filter I made for techno kick drums. And it looks like a traffic light because there's 3 knobs, and I call it traffic light filter. So basically by building and practicing, I didn't take a course because I kind of already understood how to write code. It was more just how to do it in audio and write it readable and stuff like that. So that was the majority of it. Yeah, was practice.
I'm just on the Juice website now. So is it literally like you can download it and then you can start making plugins?
Yeah. I mean, you have to know a little bit of C++, so it is like, proper coding, but they already have created the API, or the API meaning like the interface. Yeah. And it's a matter of just learning how that ecosystem works. And you don't even have to just do plugins. You can make like standalone audio software with it. It's cool. A huge deal in the audio dev community. It's really nice.
I've never heard of that before. I'm going to take a look at that.
Yeah, do it, man. It's cool.
Yeah, there's something about coding that I've always been really interested in, but just never given myself time to go and learn it. I feel like it's something. I feel like it's like learning an instrument or learning how to produce. It's like a whole new skill. I've got friends that are developers, and I just don't understand any of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like learning those skills or learning a language. I mean, I do find that a lot of like talented music producers have the right type of brain to do it. They just never learned it. I mean, anyone can learn it. I don't mean to say like you have to have a certain type of brain, but the way that music producers are wired, we're already kind of in that problem solving mindset. Like it's like, oh, there's this problem in my mix, or this instrument doesn't sound exactly the way I want. What's the steps I can take to make it work, right? And and software engineering is the same thing. It's just having to know a language, you know?
Yeah, I guess it is, although like it is very math based to a certain extent. It's like you take this frequency away, then it allows this frequency to go up. You use this here and you use that there. It's very much like subtract and divide and all of those that realistically you don't necessarily look at music producers or engineers or people that are great at playing the instruments as good mathematicians, but it generally is zeros and ones at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's critical thinking too, and that's something we're sorely missing in the world.
Massively.
Yeah, so like that's why I always say, like, you know, music production is a great skill even if you're not trying to have a music career. Like not only is it fun, but you're exercising your brain, you know, and I think that's important.
I think it's about just being creative. I think it's so easy nowadays to not be creative, and I mean being creative in like an individual way. Whereas there's so many people that are being creative that then are just being replicated by other people thinking they're creative. However, they're not. They're just replicating somebody else's creativity.
Yes. And it might get worse with large language models and generative AI.
And with people like you.
I mean, I'm just helping you make your mix down cleaner, man. I don't know, like, you know.
No, yeah, I think that's definitely a conversation I want to go into later on, because it's really interesting, actually. And I'd like to get your thoughts on that. But sticking with the introduction of your career, and so you go into a company like iZotope. What's the goals for you?
Yeah, so what's the goal for me personally?
For going into iZotope, like, what is that goal of like, okay, I'm going into work for iZotope. Like, how do I grow? How do I get to this point of where you're at now?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and one I haven't thought about in a while. So let me kind of try and get through this. So my goal was basically to, if I can't, I mean, I always kind of said, like, if I can't make a career making music, I want to make a career out of helping other people make music.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm still in the phase of wanting to have my cake and eat it too. But like the main thing I wanted to do was have an influence on how these tools are built and discovering new technologies that like we just never thought was even possible. And when I was, you know, I was a user of iZotope plugins before I was an employee, and I just always found that iZotope was looking into the future. You know, one of our marketing people, his name's Christoph. He said once to me, and I thought this was a really funny quote, like, you know, we were dealing with, you know, AI assisted tools before ChatGPT was in its diapers, you know, which I always thought was a funny kind of marketing tagline, but it also is what drew me to the company in the first place. Is like, oh my God, look at like the first mix assistant or track assistant or whatever they called it at the time in Neutron, helped me learn how to mix better, you know, and it was things like that. And I mean, really, I'm already kind of doing what I wanted to do, and now it's more just about growing my knowledge, becoming a better developer, and also becoming a better producer. Because I'm really like have like an in-depth knowledge of the tools now, which is really nice. So some of it was also selfish in that regard.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to be a better music producer.
I love that.
Yeah. So
That's great. That's great. I want to talk about your role and kind of how it works with design and development. I just recently finished the Elon Musk book by Isaac Waterson. I don't know if you've read it.
I haven't read it yet.
I don't know your thoughts on Elon or anything like that, but genuinely, like he's a crazy man, but now listening to that book, I'm like, okay, I get it all now. I completely understand his brain to a certain extent. And something that he harps on about every time is the design of the product to be the designers to work very closely with the engineers, and how when you're in a company, especially when it's a software company, when the designers have one goal and the developers have another goal, and then it doesn't make sense. Whereas when you work both next to each other, you create synchronicity between the product, which makes the end user, it works exactly how the end user will want to use it. Because let's say, for instance, like you're a software developer, it doesn't necessarily mean you're the best person of like the end user, right?
Yeah.
Because you know the intricacies of the software, you know how it works, etc., etc. But then how do you design that product to then get that across to the end user? How do you do that at iZotope? How do you work together?
Yeah, so it's definitely a very important thing in plugin development. I think like even Steve Jobs also had a similar philosophy as well. And it's we basically, so on my team, we have 5 software developers, including me. We have 2 quality assurance engineers. We have a product manager, a sound designer, and then UI UX designer. And the
Explain what UI UX is to
so
anybody that doesn't know.
Yeah, acronyms galore. UI is user interface, and UX is user experience, which isn't even a proper acronym, but we love using X's instead of U's. But the user experience is basically what you're getting at, is like how, especially with complex audio software, like Ozone has like a bajillion things you can do with it. Like how is that going to be intuitive to a user just looking at it? So the first part of the answer to your question is like, we have a dedicated department of people who are experts at that. And what they do at the beginning of a project, along with product management, is do user interviews. And they do that throughout the development of the plugin, and it's also involved in the beta and stuff. And if people aren't understanding, like when we add a feature and we ship it to beta and people don't understand what the feature is doing or how to use it, we got to change the user interface of the user experience up a little bit, because we can't ship something that people don't understand. And sometimes it gets really, really, really difficult, and you have developers and UX people just like, we're not butting heads. We all respect each other and respect each other's expertise, but sometimes it's like, no, I don't think, like you get into these really intense discussions about how to solve that problem. And but for the most part, we have someone designing it, and the developers can implement those designs. But at the end of the day, it's a very collaborative effort. But we will defer to the expertise of the UI UX people, most of the time.
How do you become a UI and UX expert? Because it feels like you just need to know people.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I guess if you're just a UX like interviewer, like researcher, you probably need to be someone. I mean, you'd probably be good at it. You'd definitely be good at it. But like for like specifically like UI people, I think some level of graphic design is necessary. Because they use these tools like Figma and all this sorts of stuff where they're designing the actual things, and they can hand that over to us and we can implement that in the product. Sometimes they have to give us PNGs to throw in there.
Can you explain what Figma is?
Okay, yeah. Figma is a company that has this really cool app on online, and you can do graphic design like on the web, and it's a really powerful tool that like pretty much they've really strangleholded the market in the past like year or two. You know, like Adobe tried to this is public. Yeah. Adobe tried to buy it, and it got blocked by the U.S. government, which, you know, it's good to see that they still block some monopolies at some point. But, yeah.
You want to buy Twitter, though? You're not ever going to get blocked for that.
No, apparently not. You know, we're all up on the Elon Musk train today.
Yeah.
But, yeah, like it's exactly that. It's a really powerful image.
It's pretty much a tool that allows you to create a product without it being created.
Correct.
Right?
You can do prototypes and yeah.
It's really interesting. I've worked on a few software products before, and the team have like sent it to me in Figma, and I'm like, wow, this is actually really interesting. Like the intricacy that you can go into if it's done well is. It's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we get a prototype from our UX UI person, and it is just like basically the only thing missing is audio. Like it's already like almost like a fully functioning version of the feature. Yeah, it's super cool.
So does the I want to talk about the whole process of creating a new plugin or creating a plugin, right? So let's say, for instance, you currently work on, is it Nectar?
Well, no, I'm actually right now. My team is working on something very exciting. We're revamping a cult classic.
Okay.
Depending on when this airs, I don't know if I can say anything, but
so this airs on the 19th of March.
The 19th of March. Oh, it does. Okay, I'm working on Trash. I'm working on Trash. New version of Trash. It should be out by March 19th, I believe. So I don't think I'll get in trouble for that. Trash is a distortion plugin. So my team works on a assortment of the music plugins. But our current project is creating the new Trash, which is something I've been yelling from a mountaintop for years. Like, can we please make Trash now? Can we please make Trash now? Can we please make Trash now?
So will that be Trash 3?
It's a little interesting. I mean, technically, yes, but like, I don't think it'll be marketed that way because it's kind of like a revamp. And
you can't even buy it on your website now.
No, you can't. No. And there's, you know, when we discontinued Trash 2, I was of two minds. As a user, I love Trash 2. I was very upset. As a developer, I could not be happier because maintaining Trash 2 got really, really difficult after like 10 years.
There was just a lot in there, right?
So much.
It was just almost like too much.
Yeah.
And that's something for me that when I'm looking at buying a plugin, simplicity for me, I'm like, I don't want to be going into menus and I don't want to be doing this and left, right. I want pure simplicity. That's why I love I know we probably shouldn't talk about it, but like some of the one knobs, like Waves one knob features, it's literally like, or the sausage fattener. You know exactly what you're going to get with it, if you know what I mean. It's just so simple.
There was a reason it was the biggest plugin like ever for such a long time.
I think Dada Life made more money on sausage fattener than they did their career.
Probably. I wouldn't be surprised. But I think from that, you'll like this new, and this is part of the reason we're not calling it Trash 3, is it's kind of a slimmer version of Trash.
Cool. Okay, so let's go back to that then. Okay, you're all in a room, and I kind of want to just go through the whole process.
Let's do it.
So you're in a room, you all decide Trash is the new one, right? Trash is what we're going to work on. How does that conversation even start? What's the like? Is there a whiteboard? Like, what is it?
No, there's definitely lots of whiteboards, but it starts out mainly as a discussion with like the product management organization as a whole kind of talks to the higher ups, and they put together a roadmap for the year. And then that's when it's like, okay, I think we're going to make Trash. And this is and the product manager kind of makes like a brief pitch of what Trash will be. And then once that happens,
I'm sorry to butt in. But
go for it.
With the product manager, are you all working together with the product manager, or is that just the product manager is like just a singular team?
It depends on the product manager and the team, but I have a very good relationship with our product manager, and we work very collaboratively, and I'm very thankful for that, because I'm very opinionated, and I like getting involved with those things. But it's almost always some level of collaboration. It's just, but in terms of what we're going to do next, that is more of a product management leadership sort of decision, because we don't know anything about what's going to make the company money. We don't know. We just know what we want to build. And we're all audio nerds that just want to build cool stuff. So, also that people love to use, of course, but Anyways, so once we know what we're going to be making, then it's more of a collaborative process, a whiteboarding, an ideation. Sometimes we even do, and we're about to start, since Trash will have shipped by the time this airs, we're starting something new after that. And we'll be in this ideation phase soon. And we sometimes have these these basically, so I don't want to get into Agile and like what a sprint is, but we have like innovation sprints, which is like a week or two where everyone just splits off and like makes something they think would be cool for this project we're about to work on. I'm so excited for it. It's like the best, because you're just like, there's no
creative.
Yeah, exactly. It's like there's no bounds other than it needs to fit like this idea of a product. So if it's like Ozone, it needs to be something that's going to be helping with mastering. And we just hack and make a cool little prototype of what we think, and then we basically come together and imagine the story of the product and kind of which of these things, and maybe some things that weren't worked on, seem like they would be a good fit. And then, we talk to users and basically, say like, the UX people are very good at sort of subtly prodding people for like what they want and don't have, or what they'd like to see in a previous version of Ozone or Neutron that doesn't exist right now. And they sort of stack that up of like what the people want versus what we have the capability of making within the time frame we're given. And that's the hard part. There's deadlines and things that, you can't just like launch software when it's done, because at that point the company's run out of money, and I'm not getting paid. My colleagues aren't getting paid. And it's all because we took 5 years to make Ozone 12, 11, whatever. And so it's basically all weighing all of those things, and then we come together with a plan, and then we iterate that plan throughout as we ship betas, etc. But the ideation
and from start to finish, from start to finish, from ideation to proof of concept to all of that, to then actually developing it, building it, to then getting it onto the beta stage, to then getting it out. Obviously, this is a massive overarching question, but like, how long does that usually take? Let's say, for instance, with Trash. With
Trash, we started it in, when was it? It must have been either October or September-ish.
2023.
Yeah, 2023.
So still pretty speedy.
Trash in particular is a very speedy one. But for Nectar, for instance, we spent like 7 months, I want to say, something like that, 6 months. Ozone longer. So it depends.
Is that just because they're bigger products?
Bigger products. It depends on the feature set and the size of the team, really. So if the team is bigger, you can accomplish more in less time, of course. And we've
Can you though? Can you? Because does there come a point when there's too many cooks in the kitchen?
Yes, there does. And that's the caveat, is like it's like a line that at some point, it's like a compressor threshold, right? Like you eventually,
nicely done.
Yeah, thanks, man. There is a threshold at a certain point where it is too many cooks in the kitchen. And I think right now we have some pretty like small, nimble teams that are doing some really incredible stuff.
That's what I love about seeing interesting artists, like development company, like just generally when there's somebody that's small that's got enough talent that can pivot very fucking quickly and can release shit straight away, and there's something about that. I just had a conversation with James Hype about that.
Oh, cool.
And kind of talking about how he, as an artist, like he just put edits out on SoundCloud, just like he'd make it and then put it out straight away. And there's a level of that I like. There's certain software companies that I absolutely adore, right? Like I love what you guys do.
Thank you.
And the business model that you guys do, you seem to keep innovating. I'm a huge lover of sound toys. Like sound toys for me personally, I know we're probably not supposed to be talking about other companies.
It's fine
when we're talking about iZotope, but sound toys to me is one of the best out there.
I love sound toys.
However, they don't bring out enough. They don't innovate that. And I think there comes a point when it's like, you've got a great product, but on a business model, I'm sure, yeah, you're all doing well, but like, you've done great shit. Keep doing great shit. Yeah, I love the guys over there, but that's the thing for me that I'm like, there has to be a happy medium. Like you can have the greatest artists in the world, but if you're not releasing music, people will start to forget about you.
Yeah.
And I think what the business model that you guys do is like, there's always something in the works. That there's always something really interesting going to be made. And yeah, it's business. People are like, fuck's sake, I've got to keep buying money on the next updates or anything like that, but makes your music better.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a very large or a loud crowd. I don't know about large, that every time we ship something new, it's like, oh great, now I have to buy this, and I'm like, you don't have to, but like also, I mean, that's the cost of business and innovation. Like technology gets better, things get better, etc. Things
get cheaper as well.
Things
which
do
is crazy
get cheaper.
To say.
Yeah,
it's crazy to say, but like things get cheaper.
They do, and there's this market, this industry in particular is ridiculous when it comes to sales, and our marketing people do a great job. But it's like, as someone who uses plugins, like it's like there's a culture of waiting until Black Friday or whatever to buy the new thing, because the price is going to drop. Yeah. And I totally understand that. If you can afford to wait a few months, if you're in Hollywood or you're working at a big studio in LA or whatever, you usually can't afford to wait, but like they have the money. Or you're a super, you need, like you've been working on a track and then all of a sudden we release a plugin that you're like, oh my God, that solves the problem that I've been bashing my head against the wall for whatever. But I mean, yes, I agree with you. And it's one of the things that drew me to iZotope as a company, is that they have a dedicated research team full of PhD. Like I have a PhD in physics. They have PhDs in digital signal processing and machine learning. And like they're the audio like gurus. Yeah. And they will come up, and they're very active in the community, in like the research community, and they're ahead of the curve. They know what's going on months before the world has heard of it. Years sometimes.
And what's their roles?
Their roles is to be scientists, basically, and come up with things that we can turn into products. So are they going out and talking to engineers and producers, or are they just coming up with these ideas in their own head? They're mostly sticking to like the literature of like the scientific community of DSP or machine learning, and seeing all of these things that are possible that are only in like the scientific literature. So it's not even something that the audio industry at large is aware of yet. And then they basically make a prototype, like say, hey, we can do this if y'all want to do it. Yeah. And then we're like, that's fucking sick. We need to use that like now. And it varies in terms of whether the business people think it's going to make money or not. And
can you give me an example?
Yeah. So, I'll give you a few examples. I mean, the assistants in our products, which for those of you who don't know, we have this assistant technology where you can click a button, it'll listen to your audio, and it'll make suggestions based on that using machine learning. So that started out as a research prototype. Also, one I'm very proud of that I was very involved in is in Nectar 4, we have this module called Backer, which is a real-time singing voice converter. So it'll turn your voice or the vocalist's voice into a different voice. Now, it doesn't work perfect. It's not like those YouTube videos you see where they're like recreating Drake or whatever, because it's in real time. Like, it's more of a creative effect thing. But that came from a research prototype where it's like, hey, I can turn my voice into this. And it's like, whoa, that's wild. I think that would give people a lot of creative options. And so when Nectar was pitched as the next thing we're going to work on, I was like, this is the time to use that tech. But then the generative AI revolution happened during the development of that product. So it was like, oh, this isn't going to make as big of a splash as we thought it was going to. And that was not the fault of research, because they actually came to us with this tech like a long time before that.
But I think the thing is in argument against that, what the AI side of thing is just copying voices, right? It's copying human beings, actual artists' voices, right? Whereas what you're doing is you're almost creating a new voice that doesn't sound like anybody else.
Basically, yeah. It's more of like a vocal synthy sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, you can use references, but it's like what you were saying before about lots of people copying the same thing. Like, no one wants to hear the Drake copy.
No.
Like, no one wants to hear like a Will Clark cover DJ, it's like, I think people are going to always be drawn to something new and exciting, not like just recreations of old things. So I think a lot of the burden is on the user. Like, make something cool with it. Don't just use it to sound like everyone else.
I totally agree. And I think that's my issue with AI to a certain extent at this moment in time, is AI for me, and I'd like to get your opinion, but AI for me is more about copying or regurgitating what's out there rather than actually being creative and creating something new.
Yeah, so, oh man, we could talk about this for hours, so I'll try and keep my opinions
No, go for
brief.
it. I want to hear.
I agree to a certain extent. I think people aren't being creative enough with the AI, because I think the generative stuff like has the opportunity and the ability to create new things from the knowledge of old. What I'm worried about when it comes to it is, and this is a personal view, not a view of the company or anything, is I worry, especially as an artist, about right now it is a really hard thing to stand out from the crowd, and social media is such an important, I hate saying that, it's such an important part of being an artist right now, to be able to get your music heard and stuff. So what happens when the TikTok influencer that already has like 2 million followers or whatever starts using generative AI to make a tune, and then all of a sudden that's at #1 on the Billboard charts or #1 on Beatport, because they already had 2 million fans to make it.
The audience.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's not going to be creative. I mean, I don't want to say that all TikTok influencers aren't creative. I'm sure somebody that has a TikTok following can make good music even with AI, et cetera, or without. But what I do think gives me hope for the future is that like the type of influencer I'm talking about in this situation doesn't really care about the music, but just wants to do it because it's cool or it gets them clicks or whatever. That person wants to be an influencer. They don't want to be a musician, right? And so the people who use the technology to speed up their workflows and allow for more time to be creative, that to me, I feel like is the true power of the technology that's coming out. Like, I don't know how to sound design this sort of bass that I hear in my head, so I write it out in words, and now all of a sudden I have that bass sound I wanted. Cool, I just saved myself like hours of time. I can use that sound now and focus my time on being creative instead of being nitpicky in the box. Of course, there are plenty of times to be nitpicky in the box, and it's enjoyable for some people. But I think that's where the power of it comes in, and will allow for more innovation and creativity, is for the people who are saving time, not the people who are just being lazy. If that may, like efficiency versus laziness, I feel like they're kind of two sides of the same coin. But I'm going to listen back to this later and be like, Cory, what were you talking about? But
no, I don't disagree with you. I think there are levels of it being very interesting. I personally haven't dived into it that much. I haven't dived into, like, I don't really know where I would go to get that AI kind of.
It's also
support.
like it's not at that point yet. I feel like where it's
No.
as useful to people who produce music for like their career. I will say I think iZotope's stuff is very useful because like for instance, like if I'm mastering a track, I almost always start with Ozone's Master Assistant because it just sets some settings already that like it just saves me some time, and then I have a starting point and I can work off of it. That's kind of how I like to use it, is like get me somewhere in the ballpark and then I'll tweak it and make it fit. With these like text prompt generated things, there's no room for that. Like if you don't like it 100%, well, you're kind of you can't tweak the release or the attack or the cutoff on the filter. Like it's just there, and you have to deal with it.
What would be really interesting is, let's say, for instance, you could have an AI platform that you would type a text in, and it would create a preset for a synth that you can then go and edit.
Yeah,
that would be fucking amazing.
It is.
Or you could put, like, let's say for instance, I want a Macioplex bass line, so I'd put a clip of the bass line into the audio and go, please make me a bass line like this, as in a patch for Silent or whatever that patch is.
Yeah,
that would be fucking amazing.
There's probably, and I don't want to say this because I'm not aware of what is out there in all of it because it's such a growing space, but like there probably is something like that in its early stages right now.
Yeah.
And I guarantee in like a year or two we'll probably be at that point. And it'll do a good job. And we'll have like, I mean, even like things like SynPlant. I don't know if you checked out like SynPlant 2. Oh my God, I'm pitching other people. I'm going to get fired. No, it's okay. SynPlant 2, it's SYNPLANT.
I do know this.
Yeah.
I do know this.
Yeah. They have a really cool thing where it generates like a bunch of different sounds, and then you can tweak the parameters of the synths and stuff. It's really cool. And you can drop a sample in and it kind of stems out from there.
Yeah.
I think in the future we're going to have something like that, but you can give it, I want a Macioplex bass line like in his track, whatever. And it'll pop something out, and it'll sound pretty good. I think we are going to get to that point, and then it's going to be more about like, curating at that point in terms of your sound design versus getting tweaky, except for the people that are sound design gods, and everyone has their favorite sound design god, and those people are always, I feel like, going to be inventing new sounds in ways that we just
can't do.
Exactly. Yeah. And
I think that's the interesting thing, and it's kind of what I was saying about my feelings on AI is that I don't know if you've heard the Oasis album that was all created on AI.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
And like,
what was it called? AISIS or something, or like
it was amazing. But I listened to it and I was like, yes, this is an Oasis album. Oasis could release this, and this is an Oasis album. However, the AI didn't create Oasis.
Right.
And this is the thing it's going to be very interesting for me, is how does AI actually create art because it's not, an artist isn't just about the music.
Of course not.
Right? Like, look at Oasis. Like, Oasis is unbelievable art alongside so much drama.
So much drama.
And so much style. Like, it's just literally, that is the 90s and early noughties kind of, like, band. The beef they had with Blur.
Yeah.
Just like everything to do with that. The beef they had within the band itself. Still how much hate goes on between those two now.
Yes, I know.
Like, that is Oasis, right?
It is, yeah.
And I don't ever see a software being able to recreate that. Because what a lot of people buy into is, yes, it's a great record, but they're also great artists. And I'd love to know whether AI is purely going to be creating artists, or if AI is going to be helping artists to achieve the creation of music, not being the artist.
Yeah, I certainly hope that it's the latter. And that's kind of what I like when I can just say that as a company, we strive for that. But also on a personal level, that's what I strive for, because I'm not trying to, because I the former scenario of what you're saying in terms of creating an artist, that is something I don't want to see a world where we are, worshiping generated holograms of people that aren't real. And also the way that these things are trained, that's another conversation for another time, maybe, in terms of where the data is coming from, which there are a lot of people fighting that good fight right now in terms of make sure that the data sets you're using, you have permission to use, because if you're using, music you don't have the rights to train the AI, that's stealing from the artist. That's using their work, and it should be illegal. That's my opinion, but I think there's a lot of people who are working to make sure that artists get royalties when their stuff if they want their stuff to be used like that. And I think that is what's going to have to happen. But on the other, like I said, that's kind of a separate topic. But on the other hand, it's people want to connect with the artists themselves. That is why social media has become such a big thing for musicians, is people want to connect. They want human connection. That's in our DNA. It's something we strive for. We yearn for.
Agreed.
I can't connect with a robot, at least not yet. Until we turn bionic and can plug in or whatever. But the point is I want human connection, and I think most people are like that as well. And yeah, it's a cool thing to see an AI generated artist, but at the end of the day, you want to buy a ticket to see a human that you wouldn't be able to see otherwise perform.
Agreed. It goes back to COVID, when everything was live stream, right? And everyone was like, live stream's the biggest thing, the next biggest thing, and everyone's going to carry on doing this after COVID. Yeah, some people do, but 95% of people don't. Yeah. And they want that human interaction, and venues and live music and everything like that came back literally overnight when they could.
Exactly.
It was the biggest thing ever.
Exactly.
How do you, with iZotope, when you guys are developing softwares and kind of working on updates, what is that balance between doing updates and also having to run a business as well? Because there's still that level of we need to give as much value as possible to the end user, but then there also comes a point where it's we don't want to just not give enough value, because people are just going to get pissed and then the product's not going to sell. Yeah,
it's so when you say updates, you mean the major version increases?
Yeah, so
Ozone 9 to
now
Ozone 10?
Ozone 11, right? So you've done a lot of new updates, and there's some really interesting things on there that I've seen from the overviews. You can now mix down. You've got the full mix, you've got the vocal mix, you've got the drum mix, etc., etc. That's an unbelievable piece of kind of genius, realistically, because now you're mixing a whole record from one piece of software, realistically, not just an overall. But do you have parameters with the team that we have to add a certain amount of features to then make it viable to sell?
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. It's kind of this concept of what's called an MVP, minimal viable product, which, I mean, or minimal marketable product is probably the right one. Whatever, I'm not going to get into the intricacies of that. And I know one of my colleagues is probably rolling their eyes at me right now. But the point being that there is a threshold where it's we need to add this much value in order for it to justify making a new release that people have to pay for. And then we also have another team, which I'm going to go ahead and go on the record and take credit for the name of this team. It's called the Pit Crew. I'm a huge Formula One fan, so like it stuck, which was nice. But what they do is they essentially work really hard to make sure that like when Apple decides to launch their new operating system or make a new computer chip or whatever, we have, this team is very talented at pumping out like point updates to make sure people's software works smoothly. But then there's the product teams, like the one that I'm on, that decide basically that. Like once we get to this point, we'll have enough. And that's where those deadlines come in. Like we need to have this level of features in by this point, or else we're going to have to delay the launch or whatever. And that comes from a lot of research of seeing where the gaps are in both the software and the market. And, there usually needs to be one or two things that is just like brand spanking new. But yeah, I mean, that's more of a PM, like product management decision, marketing decision normally. But, we usually end up having to cut back on what we thought we were going to make. So we shoot for the moon, or we shoot for the stars, and if we get to the moon, then that's okay.
And then do those other kind of products that don't get added in, do they carry on getting worked on?
Like the other features that we don't get to, eventually. We usually save them for the next time around. And I mean, usually the idea is kind of to put too much so that we have something to cut if we need. Like we always we try and plan for, okay, this is how much time we have. We can probably do this, and this within that amount of time. Something always comes up, or something is harder than we thought it was going to be when we start working on it. And that's when you have to start like cutting down. But we can't cut down if we think it goes past the threshold that I talked about before of like, is this enough new value?
For sure.
Yeah.
Going back to that Pit Crew, how does that process work? Because we've all been on, you get the new laptop and then a bunch of softwares don't work because your operating system is way more up to date than what the software is. You guys have always been really good at kind of keeping that up to date, but there's a lot of software companies that aren't. How do you, first of all, does Apple tell you?
Yes, but not as early as we'd like normally. And to be fair, there are people who do it quicker than us too. And they're usually more of the types of companies, that basically try to get more people to their current line instead of constantly upgrading. So they have more resources to dedicate to updating because their business model allows for it. But like Apple, basically as soon as we get word from Apple, it's on our radar and we know we have to get on this quick.
Start work.
Yeah. And that means looking at every single product as soon as we have access to that operating system. And we don't always get betas of things. And I mean, when this Apple Silicon chips were coming out, it's not really like they're going to ship us a laptop, right? So sometimes you get unexpected things. And then if it doesn't work, so the first part of the work is qualifying, which means that a QA engineer is going to test the product in all its glory. And as soon as something wrong happens that didn't happen on the previous operating system, for example, okay, we got to fix that before we can say that this is supported for Sonoma or whatever. It's a very tedious process and it takes, resources. And the Pit Crew does a great job of doing what they can to stay on top of it. But, everyone always wants to be quicker with that. Like I personally don't upgrade my operating system usually until like a year later because I have to give the developers time to catch up because Apple just wants logic to work, like they want you to use.
Yeah, but they always fuck it up.
Nope.
This is the thing.
Yeah.
For me, like Apple, like I'm a Logic user. I use Logic. I can use Ableton kind of, but I use Logic and they still fuck it up on when they do updates. I
am notoriously I have an infamous hatred of Logic at work. Like every time there's a Logic specific bug or something, I'm like just like fuck, I have to open Logic and test this bug. So I'm not really a fan of Logic in general. Like the workflow to me doesn't work as well as Ableton, but I have heard a lot of people saying the same thing. And also there are a lot of times where there's a new Logic update. Oh crap, vocal synth doesn't work anymore. That's the one I remember from a couple years ago. Like as soon as they added the Ableton style like loops, vocal synth just broke. And we had our poor customer care people had calls up to here like, hey, vocal synth doesn't work anymore. What the heck? And we're like, oh my God, like we have to patch that like immediately. So you stop what you're doing and you make vocal synth work on the new Logic, and then you can get back to whatever you're doing. So it's a huge
spanner in the works.
Yeah, it's like, and it's not like I don't know if we got a Logic beta ahead of time or not in that case, but I don't even think we'd have the resources or time to test for every Logic beta that comes out. We usually don't like to test on beta versions of DAWs because that might not be the final version, and maybe we fixed 100%. So it's definitely a frustrating process, but I also like, I don't know, I have a lot of respect for the engineers at Apple, obviously. That's my diplomat political side speaking, but it is certainly frustrating as a third party developer.
Well, it's frustrating for me. Like for example, this webcam that I use is a Sony camera. I updated I'm on the M1 and I can't remember what the newest update was. Sonoma. Like I can't use the webcam.
Oh my God.
Because the webcam software. So I had to delete everything from my computer and put the old software back in.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Just to do this. There was no other way around it. And like you're just like, of course, Sony's not a software company as well. Sony's a camera company, and that's all they're concentrating. They're not concentrating on updating softwares. They're concentrating on cameras. And that's the thing that frustrates me the most, is that you're just doing stuff that just doesn't need to not be done.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a split mind of this. One thing I'll say is that no matter how frustrating it is to users, it's more frustrating for us.
I can imagine.
But I will say, like, Apple, their priority, like, is to make everyone use Apple everything, right? Their whole ecosystem thing. And what they've been slowly doing, I don't know this for sure, but I mean, it seems pretty obvious when you look on the surface, is with each operating system update, they're kind of bringing the iOS, like the iPad, iPhone OS closer to the desktop to kind of make it all one cool little Apple user experience, which is cool. But like, is it worth all of the collateral damage to Apple? Certainly, because they have. I mean, what are people like us supposed to do? Say,
it doesn't matter for them.
Yeah, I mean, like, we're not going to stop selling plugins that are compatible on Apple computers. That would be all of our money, and no one would ever use the plugins. Like they really do have this sort of stranglehold on the software market. And also they make software for everything. Like they have Logic, they have all their native plugins in there. So their response is always going to be like, well, you could just use Logic. And then you'll say,
and you can use Logic. Now they're doing they have the mastering platform in there on the new. I don't know how good it is because I haven't.
It's not Ozone. I haven't used it, but I'm just going to say that.
But Ozone's amazing. Like I've not long been using Ozone. Let's say, for instance, maybe a year and a half, and I was in a session and one of my friends was like, try this. Like I had Ozone, but I didn't use it. I used it for like just specific, like the maximizer or the limiter or something like that.
The maximizer.
I use it individually. But then he was like, try this, try the like AI learning kind of, and I was like, wow, this is fucking amazing. This is like absolute game changing. And to the point now where like I went into mixing an album last week or the week before, and the mix engineer is literally using Ozone as a base layer.
Oh, wow.
And like because I would give him my mixed Ozone kind of session, and then he would be like, okay, well, this sounds great, but now how do we make this sound better?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when he goes into depth onto each individual track and work the track. So then the Ozone but he's working it through the Ozone.
Oh, that's
patch.
interesting.
And it's really interesting how it's worked, because like most quintessential mix engineers will pull everything off and then just stick it through an SSL hardware desk and start again. But the speed of what you can do with things with the Ozone software, and also the like, okay, let's bounce it out, let's live with it for a day, let's go back and listen to it in the studio. Okay, those vocals are poking too loud, it's running too hot on the limiter. Like all these little things that you can change that you can't change when you're in a hardware setting.
No, especially because the knobs are, you had to write down where all their positions were and et cetera. And now you forgot what you were even trying to do in the first place, and you have to reprint it and it might sound different. Like Ozone is pretty incredible, if I may say so myself. It just like Low End Focus is one that it's a module in Ozone that is probably my favorite, like for just like gluing together like kick and bass type of stuff. Mm-hmm. And that's something I didn't even think like I needed. It was one of those features, where I was like, oh wow, like, but you can also tweak it because it's one of those things where you can work with it. I mean, I'd really love to see that mix engineer work with it and see how because that's the best thing about making plugins, is not only just being able to use them yourself, but see people use them in ways that you didn't ever imagine them being used in. And like, that's the best. You're like, oh my God, we didn't intend that, but that is amazing. I'm going to start using the plugin like that because that was a great idea. And that to me, I mean, people are just so creative, and it's inspirational.
Well, it's also just how our brains work. All of our brains work differently. Yeah. And like, you guys might be on one track of like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be used, right? Just like this Moog next to me is supposed to be used in a certain way. It's built to be used in a different way. But if I plug in this here and this here and this here and route this here that no one else has ever done, you then create something completely different. Yeah. It's the same with software to a certain extent. Yeah. Like, for me, like, a lot of people just run everything on buses. I don't run a single thing on a bus, ever. I run everything wet on the channel, which has its pros and cons, but like, it's weird. I barely use compression. And
I like dynamic range too.
Yeah. And you just, and you just like never, there's just everybody does something differently, which makes your sound unique. The thing with Ozone is that it just allows you to make it all sound better. Yeah. At a click of a button. It's definitely cheating. It's definitely cheating, but I love it. It's the best form of cheating.
It's the best form of cheating. I think I'm gonna have to tell our marketing people that's the new tagline. No, I mean, I love to hear that. I mean, and you're absolutely right. Like, everyone has their own ways of doing things. It's like, I'm not like when I do collaborate with people on music, that is the fun part, is like watching how other people do things. And you can sometimes learn from that, or just be like, oh, my way is way better, but I'm not going to tell them that. Or you do tell them that and they say, fuck off. Like, I do how I do. But like, I mean, it's you're absolutely right. It's like a beautiful thing about creativity in humans is just that there's always how many people are there in the world? Like 7 billion there's 7 billion different ways of doing something,
100%. 100%. Dude, we've just done an hour and 10. I think we should wrap it up. How can people follow you on your socials to kind of go through your career? How can people go get involved with the iZotope career or crew and get involved on the software plugins?
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's been a real honor. Good chat. I feel like we could have gone for another couple of hours. So for me personally, Cory Goldsmith Music is my Instagram. I have a website, corygoldsmith.com, and just how it's spelled, and it has my music and stuff on there, and my socials. And then iZotope, go to nativeinstruments.com or iZotope.com. Check out our plugins. There's free trials of all of our plugins, so you don't have to buy it. You can just install it, see if you like it, and if you do like it, then you can buy it. If not,
or just buy it because they're amazing.
Yeah, thanks. Will Clark said it himself, you know. So yeah, that's basic. And then obviously like iZotope on socials, like it's all on the website, so you'll be able to follow there. We have some really cool content creators that know what they're talking about, that make our like videos and stuff, and they do a really good job. It's worth a follow.
I think that's the thing I struggle with the most with a lot of software, not just iZotope, but it's like the amount they can do, and like I'll be using it for something, and then there's like I'm not actually using a tenth of its potential.
I know. I'm the same way, you know. I mean, there's things in iZotope software I didn't even know existed until I started working there, and I was like, you need me to fix a bug on what? Like, oh snap, that was there the whole time. You know, like it's wild, you know. You can never know too much about these things, but I mean, like even with the one knob stuff, it's like, okay, well, what's going on there? And then my developer brain starts like wanting to analyze it and see like what's happening in the spectrum, and you know, what exactly is it doing? How do I use that? But yeah.
Do you ever make plugins in your free time? Or are you not allowed to say?
Well, like, I'm not allowed to make, or at least I'm not allowed to sell plugins in my free, or like make plugins that I'm going to sell in my free time. Do I have fun from time to time? Yes. I'll say that much. I do have fun in my free time, but, you know, I'll put it like that. Yeah.
Makes sense. Dude, thanks for coming on so much.
Yeah, thanks, man. Stay in touch for sure.
Yeah, for sure, man. Keep safe, and I'll
You
catch
too.
you soon. Big love.
Sounds good, man.
And that's a wrap. Big love to everybody for coming on. Thanks for Cory to coming on, and I hope you all enjoyed it. Please share it. Please give us some comments. Please give us a like. Keep safe. See you next time.